The Red Sox rumor mill has been swirling with potential trade possibilities. In this episode, we evaluate a trade with the Miami Marlins.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Jake Ignaszewski, and here, as always, with my co-host, NESN's Lauren Willand. We hope that everybody enjoyed their weekend, was able to get out for whether it was the snowstorm that we got or it was a little bit of warmth on Sunday as well. Kind of crazy, nice and sunny. So hope you were able to enjoy the weekend, spend time with family, relax from some work time, and also continue to celebrate the Rafael Devers extension. I don't know about you, Lauren. I'm still coming off of a high a little bit from that, but there's still a lot of work to be done for this Red Sox team to be legitimately competitive in 2023. And in this episode, we were thinking about looking into a potential trade with the Miami Marlins. And this is something that has been brought up over the last few weeks or so. And Triston Casas' name came up, and the Marlins also reportedly have made 4 of their starting pitchers available. So we figured we would look at some of those starters that the Red Sox could be interested in, as well as a few other players. But I wanted to start off talking about which players, at least for the two of us, we would look at as the untouchables. Now, majority of the time, from the people that we talk to on this team, there's no real untouchables. But, Triston Casas' name was brought up in this deal. And I was curious, from your vantage point, Lauren, would you give up Triston Casas for any of these players that we're about to talk about?
I would not. And it's simply because if you genuinely think that he is the future of first base, then commit to that. Commit to him being your first baseman. And also, are you going to package Casas for another first baseman? Who do you rely on there? There's just so much uncertainty surrounding that position. Without Triston Casas, you have Eric Hosmer, who's gone now. You don't want to put Christian Arroyo at first base. Justin Turner can play first base, but he's not going to be your everyday first baseman. So if you want to commit to Casas as your first baseman and you still don't quite know what you have in him yet with the small sample size from last year that we saw. So no, I would not trade him. That doesn't mean I would not trade him next year to see, like I said, what we have what the Red Sox have in him. And if there is a backup plan, a solid plan to replace him.
Right. And, in my mind, I'm not up for a third year of trying to see if Bobby Dalbec can play that position at a major league level. And, when you look at, the different guys who could replace Casas if he did ultimately leave the organization that are within the farm system, Nico Gavadas is years away, was drafted, less than 2 years ago. And, nobody really else comes to mind immediately who could be right up in the major leagues and still be able to be productive. And I feel like with a trade with a team like the Miami Marlins, when they're looking at a potential shortstop possibility or a starting pitching possibility, obviously those are two of the main holes that the Red Sox have right now. And so in my mind, it doesn't make any sense to create yet another hole that the team would have if they traded Casas for a starting pitcher or for a shortstop. And so for me, I've reiterated this a few times. Casas and Bayo are the two that I say are untouchable. Meyer, I'm open to it with the right deal. Rafaela, I feel like this is the peak value that you're going to be able to get him as, coming off of a minor league player of the year season where, not only stole 28 bases, made incredible diving plays and robbing catches in the outfield, hit 26 home runs, batted, 290. And so being able to capitalize off of his value at this moment in time, you don't know what type of hitter he's going to be in Worcester, but you could also utilize him in center field as well down the line. But starting to look at some of these guys that the Red Sox could possibly be interested in. with the Miami Marlins, starting off with a guy like Pablo Lopez, who came very, very close to being a New York Yankee just last season. I believe it was like a Gleyber Torres was involved in that trade, and the Marlins also wanted to get one of the top shortstops that the Yankees had in their farm system, and it ultimately didn't pan out at the end of last year's trade deadline. But Lopez is a guy going into his age 27 season, is a free agent going into 2025. But he's somebody that I'd be curious to see really what he would command in terms of prospects. He's somebody who he's not going to be a number one frontline 100% ace type of starter, but he's going to be a very good number two sort of starter in my mind in any rotation.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know a lot about Pablo Lopez and that I've seen him. I don't watch a lot of games, understandably so. But when you have reports of the Red Sox potentially working on a trade with someone, you do start to dive in. Maybe you look at a little bit of highlights and scouting reports and kind of seeing what he's brought to teams over the last few years in his career. I do think there's upside there. I mean, he's young. He's 26. He'll be 27, and that little bit of control is always nice. You probably like a little bit more control with somebody that you're trading for, unless you can do sign and trade, or there's something there where it's like we're going to extend you. But if you're trading for someone, especially someone for a need that you desperately need, and this isn't like the Red Sox need one starting pitcher and all of a sudden they're a World Series contender. Like there's still a lot of holes to fill, which we've talked at length on this show. But he's 26, so that's on his side. And his strikeout to walk, I almost said strikeout to walkout ratio. His strikeout to walk ratio looks pretty good. You look at that, and the Ks to 9 innings isn't bad. So those numbers are there. And across 32 starts, he's got the 3.75 ERA, which sure you'd like it to be lower, but I don't think anyone, or maybe no, I don't think Red Sox fans would complain about that, especially what we saw last season and with the holes that need to be filled. I do think he'd be a good fit, but it becomes, I think anyone that we're going to talk about today will be a good fit, but it just becomes at what cost.
Right. And, with you speaking about, the 3.75 sort of ERA, most people forget, that's what Nathan Eovaldi has had over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And,
Right.
and most people, look at him as a incredible starting pitcher, which he has been over the last few seasons with the Red Sox. Last year, not so much struggled with, getting balls hit out of the ballpark. But for what Red Sox fans have been used to in this rotation over the last few years, Pablo Lopez would definitely be an upgrade. Michael Wacha, and I was just thinking about, when you brought up the 3.75, it made me think, when's the last time the Red Sox have had a sub 300 ERA sort of starting pitcher? Michael Wacha most recently, but it's been a little bit to where you're able to look at the Red Sox schedule and have massive motivation and confidence that the team is going to go out there, the starting pitcher is going to go out there and give you a solid 5 or 6. And so a guy like Pablo Lopez, I think would be able to give you that. And, you brought up his Ks per 9. It's at 8.7. His walks per 9 is actually compared to the 2 other pitchers that we're going to be talking about in this episode is the best of those 2 other pitchers. Walks per 9 is 2.65. And so does a really good job of commanding his pitches as well as getting ground ball stuff and getting outs when balls get into the field. As you mentioned, 3.75 ERA, 3.71 FIP as well. So does a really good job of getting outs when balls are in play, as I mentioned. And so I'm curious to see really what he would command, especially with what the Marlins were asking for last year at the trade deadline. Probably going to be a little bit pricey, if they're looking for Gleyber Torres, who at that time had a little bit of a slightly down year, but if they're looking for, one of their top shortstops of the New York Yankees, they're going to be looking for one of your top 5 top prospects. So I won't be surprised if it's a Rafaela and, one other sort of major league player that they feel like is going to be able to help them out. And one other thing that has been reported too is that they're looking more for those major league players and potentially more on the pitching side. And so I feel like Tanner Houck would be more of that fit for one of these trade packages.
Yeah, it seems that way. It seems like, a top prospect and an MLB ready type player doesn't mean that they need to be the number one player, but somebody who can be effective. We know Tanner Houck can be effective. We've seen it. And maybe he has some versatility there, being able to be used out of the bullpen, but could make a start in a pinch. We've seen that too. But I think of the players we are talking about today, that Lopez does have the most upside, and he probably would bring back the healthiest, the heftiest return out of
Mhm.
the ones we will talk about. But he's unlikely to be extended, so I feel like the Marlins should trade him. It's just, like I said, finding that right package. But I think someone like Lopez, who has experience, who has a sub 4 ERA over 5 seasons, that he's been in MLB, will command a trade package like a Meyer, a Rafaela, or a Casas, and a player who's had a few years of MLB experience under their belt, like you said, Houck. I don't think they go after Whitlock, but you never know. But if you're putting all those pitchers on the trade market or making them available for a potential trade, you have to think that some sort of pitcher probably will be involved, because if you're no one's saying that the Marlins will get rid of all of the pitchers that they've made available, but if you're opening yourself up to that, you're going to want to get something in return that's going to replace what you're giving away.
Right, and one other player that I thought about as well, and I guess would probably be brought up in most people's minds when you talk about a major league ready player being traded from the Red Sox is Verdugo, and I really don't see the Marlins going after another outfielder. If you remember, Avisail Garcia got a hefty deal with them last year. Same with Jorge Soler, so they already have a good amount of money invested in some MLB ready outfielders. Would be very surprised if they're going to go after a guy like Verdugo, whose defense isn't that great. Same with Garcia Soler, their defense ain't that great. And so if they want to have an outfield filled with players that don't have great defense, are mid-level sort of hitters. Garcia and Soler had some down seasons last year, but they've had flashes of having really good offensive seasons. But we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the episode what people over on Twitter think are the players that the Red Sox should try and trade, and who they would be willing to give up, and who they wouldn't be willing to give up. But the other guy that we wanted to talk about is another starting pitcher, and Edward Cabrera, going into his age 25 season, has had a lot of noise around his name, not only coming up through the Marlins farm system, but ever since he cracked the show, is looked at as a potential future ace. The numbers from what we're going to talk about right now is after his after his second season in the majors. So he's somebody that is still developing, still learning how to pitch in the majors and be able to be effective and use his potential and his skills in order to be able to hit that sort of development threshold that most people expect him to be, which most people expect him to be sort of like an ace. And so, I mean, if the Red Sox were able to get, one of these three pitchers that we're going to be talking about, and add him to, like a rotation of Whitlock and Bayo, that's going to be a really, really good rotation and young rotation down the line. But Cabrera, in 14 games started in 2022, had an ERA of 3.01. And on the surface, that's going to look really good. But his FIP is 4.59. And that was one thing that really jumped out to me. That is a massive jump by, 1.58. That's a good amount of jump in terms of Fangraph sort of numbers. But then his K per nine 9.42, his walk per nine 4.14. But one thing that really stuck out to me is his changeup is 91 miles per hour. That is crazy.
It is, because you don't see something like that very often. You see fastballs 91 miles an hour, and sometimes people are like, oh, that's a little bit on the slow side. So when you have a changeup going, and we've seen some nasty changeups in our time as Red Sox fans alone, and I feel like the changeup is one of the pitches that's constantly on a highlight reel throughout MLB. No matter what team, there's always one pitcher that just has some sick changeup that's just like going all over the place. It's one of the coolest pitches, I think, to just kind of watch take shape or take form. But yeah, he's a fun name, and I think that's what makes him really intriguing, is that the potential is there. And you said potential ace. He has that potential to be the ace. The Red Sox need an ace, but as we've also talked about on the show, it's just, do Red Sox fans want more potential in their farm system, on their team, or do they want these solidified players? If you're getting Cabrera and a Lopez, and you have to give up a haul to get those two, but if you're getting an MLB ready pitcher and then someone who has that potential and has shown the flashes of his potential. 14 starts is a pretty good sample size. Doesn't tell the whole story, but that's, it's not 2 starts, it's not 3 starts. And he definitely would help the Red Sox rotation, I certainly think. And it's nice that he's under control through the 2028 season. And like we talked about with Lopez, how he's not under control much longer, just to have that extra control, kind of build him up how you would want, I do think is a selling point in a trade. So I like Cabrera, but I think he would. I think he'd command a big package from the Marlins when you're parting with someone like that who has he's a top prospect. He's obviously he has that ace potential. You don't call somebody a potential ace if they for no reason. If you see that in someone, you obviously know that it's there. There's reasons that they're saying that he's an ace, but I think you'd want to see more from him before the Red Sox go out and just kind of, they're not going to blow up the farm system for this guy, but don't make your team any worse than it already is. I don't know if it can get much worse than it already is, but and sure, the Red Sox could certainly use a boost to the rotation. We 100% know that. We've acknowledged that, but I don't know if it's worth bringing in someone who just has potential when there are other pitchers on the trade market, which seems that's really the only direction the Red Sox have left at this point in the offseason. I don't know if you want to go out and get somebody who's solidified, who can help this rotation now, or go out and get someone who has that potential, but maybe not have it right away and not help the team right away.
Right, and I think that's key as well. And one point that you brought up that I think is a really good one is how Red Sox fans really feel about having more potential, or a solidified guy where they know in 2023 he is going to make an impact. And I think that there's two ways of looking at it. There's some players who don't pan out, who have these high expectations, and especially looking back at a trade like that a few years later, it could be something that could really hurt a general manager's outlook on sort of how that trade is down the line, especially with prospects, and how they potentially are able to actually be able to develop within the majors. But I think as well, looking at the long game, which I know is tough for Red Sox fans at times, looking at the long game of if you have a Cabrera, Bayo, and Whitlock sort of rotation, who knows how Whitlock is going to be able to do in a full season of rotation? That's another question as well. But being able to have a young starting rotation with a lot of control, that's something to be excited about, especially with how pivotal and how costly starting pitching is within this league. And as we know, pitching wins championships. Obviously you're going to have a good offense, but when you have a good and solid rotation, especially a good bullpen in the playoffs, that's how you end up hoisting the trophy at the end of the year. But we're going to continue to look at two more players that the Red Sox have been rumored to. Did want to mention as well, we're not going to be talking about Joey Wendle on this episode. We've talked about him a few other times in past episodes, and I feel like if we continue to bring his name up in this Marlins episode, it would just be beating a dead horse, because we both have brought up our opinions on Joey Wendle. Would be a good platoon player, but not somebody that is really going to make a huge impact in this lineup, especially if you slot him in at shortstop or second base. But as we continue to look towards the Red Sox 2023 season, we're going to continue to try and help the odds look a little bit better for if the Red Sox were going to win the World Series, or how many wins they're going to get next season. But, you can bet on other stuff outside of baseball over on betonline.net, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, which I bet you do if you're listening to this, you can even check those out at betonline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And, looking at the third pitcher on this list that in my mind would be most logical for the Red Sox to look at potentially trading for is Jesus Luzardo. He's the one guy that really stuck out to me that would be a massive upside if the Red Sox were able to grab him. He's somebody who came over from the Oakland Athletics, was a massive top prospect coming through the A's system, ended up getting traded over to the Marlins for Starling Marte. 2 trade deadlines ago. But he had a really good season with the Marlins last year. Is going into his age 26 season, isn't a free agent until 2027, but he made 18 starts, a 3.32 ERA with a 3.12 FIP. Kind of crazy. Completely opposite from Cabrera. As I mentioned, Cabrera had a 3.01 ERA and a 4.59 FIP. Wow. Luzardo had 3.32 with a 3.12 FIP. And if you're hearing FIP and you're like, Jake, I don't know what the heck this is, I'm trying to be on my Tyler Milliken stuff and, look at fan graphs, get into the nitty gritty numbers and see sort of, what else I'm able to find, how else I'm able to evaluate a player. And, essentially what FIP is it's the ERA while also evaluating the defense that the pitcher has behind him. And so essentially, what this says, at least for Cabrera, speaking with the 4.59 FIP, that, batters were able to get on base a lot more due to the balls in play, which really elevated his FIP. But for Luzardo, he does a great job of not only having great command, but great strikeout stuff. That shows in the Ks per nine, 10.75 in the walks per nine, 3.14. But curious your thoughts on Jesus Luzardo, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, he showed a ton of potential in 2022. And there we go again saying potential. I feel like we're going to say that with these guys that we are talking about. You mentioned his ERA. He also had a 104 whip, which is through his 18 starts, just over 100 innings pitched. But he did miss a lot of time last year because he had a forearm strain that happened in May. But you look at his debut with the Marlins, he had 12 strikeouts in 5 innings. And some of that, of course, could be the adrenaline. That's everyone behind you. You're making your MLB debut or your season debut for the Marlins, and it's probably a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of just motivation, and everything in between being on the big league mound. But there is a lot of upside with him, and I do like what I've seen when just grazing the highlights, looking at his scouting reports as well. And he could really be an X factor in 2023, no matter what team he's on. I think he's like the perfect candidate to have to have a breakout season in 2023. Whether somebody wants to take that chance on him will remain to be seen. Whether that team is the Red Sox remains to be seen. And the biggest thing, though, I think with Luzardo is that he needs to stay healthy because he's under team control for 4 more years. So that's a big plus right there when you're going to trade for someone. But I just feel like if you wanted to give up, I mean, you asked me at the beginning if I wanted to trade Casas. No, I don't think that it'd be worth giving up Casas for someone who has an unproven arm, who already has injury concerns. But you do look at the upside and the potential there, because much like other pitchers we've talked about, we saw it last year too with Luzardo. So I like him. I like I said, the potential is there, and I think that the numbers don't lie. There's smaller sample size than 18 starts, but that's still not a smaller sample size. And who knows what we would have seen had he not got hurt. I'd like to see a full year of him and proving he can stay healthy too. But I do like what he can bring to a team. And like I said, you have that ability to be the X factor, to have that breakout season. I just don't think it's worth giving up a Triston Casas or even a Marcelo Meyer.
And especially when you really look at, what helped the Marlins get him was trading one of their top players in Starling Marte. And so that just tells you sort of the value that Luzardo commands, especially with him getting better and better. And, one thing to sort of help fans get a little bit of a better understanding, when the A's traded Luzardo, he was having an awful season. His ERA was up around 6 or so. And, being able to, decipher his potential, at that point, and now I think it has drastically improved despite, him being injury prone, but also sort of the value that this guy brings. When you look at Lopez going into his age 27 season, but is a free agent in 2 years. And then, as you mentioned, Luzardo, 4 years until he's a free agent, but he's only 1 year younger than Lopez. Not to say that he's better by any means. Lopez has much more experience in the majors, and that's obviously the reason why he has less service time or service control on him. But I feel like, being able to get one of the three pitchers that we have spoke about obviously is going to command a pretty good haul. But I sort of what we've spoken with Lindsey Crosby from MLB Prospects about is, it's going to hurt. If the Red Sox want to get one of these top of the line starters, it's going to hurt. And I feel like with these players, it's a much better it's much better to try and get these guys, even though we spoke about, do you want potential or do you want a solidified player? I think it's much better to get some of these younger pitchers that have yet to hit their fullest ceiling rather than a Brandon Woodruff, a Corbin Burns, or a Shane Bieber, mainly because that is going to command much, much more because those guys are already solidified. You already know what you're going to get from them. And I feel like being able to not really take a gamble, but allow them to sort of develop into their own, through uh, the time that they're in the majors while, not going towards one of those high ceiling stars, I think is the best way to go about it. You could also like think in your mind, one thing that I've been thinking about, with sort of these starting pitchers that we've been talking about, also trying to think about the Red Sox future rotation is there's going to be a lot of players on the free agent market in terms of starting pitching throughout these next few years. And so that's one thing that I feel like when trading or thinking about who to trade for some of these players, which I'm guessing the Red Sox front office has already done, but you got to evaluate what players are a part of the future and which aren't. And, really, if you want to trade a Tanner Houck and a Brian Mata, I know Chaim Bloom loves his pitching depth, but you got to give something away so that you can get something back. But, starting to look at, the last guy that we wanted to talk about, and evaluating a potential Marlins trade is Miguel Rojas, their shortstop, who is a massive leader in that clubhouse. He is a little bit on the older side, but is one of the best defensive infielders in the entire league. So going into his age 34 season and is on the final year of a 2-year, $10 million deal. Last year, he batted .236, 6 home runs, 36 RBIs over 140 games. Not the best offensive shortstop by any means, but as I mentioned, one of the best defensive infielders in the league, ranked second in defensive runs saved with 15, and had the best fielding percentage with 987.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is there, and that's what he's known for, right? He's not known for his offense. He's incredibly talented as a defensive shortstop. And you wonder, would Jose Iglesias would he have come cheaper than my brain malfunctioned. Then Rojas. then Rojas. I think if you want to go for if you're trying to address that shortstop situation and you don't want to put Trevor Story over there, then you still need to look in the offensive category as well. I'm not saying Iglesias is the best offensive guy out there either. That's clearly not the case. We know that as well. But you look at the age, 34. No, it's not incredibly old, but it's not somebody who's 26, 27 years old in their prime. Is it just somebody who's going to be here for a year or two and just kind of fill that void until Meyer is ready? Is that what Story is going to do for the next 2 or 3 years or however until Marcelo Meyer is ready? So is that like a stopgap? Would he be a stopgap Rojas? Geez, one of these days I'll be able to get through a segment without stumbling over my words. But on paper, you like it. Like you said, he's on the final year of his deal, and it'd be a rental, of course, obviously with the 1-year deal or 1 year left on his deal. But on paper, yes, he looks good because of the defense, but you still look at this Red Sox lineup that still needs a little bit of offensive help. And you want to at least get somebody in that lineup who has shown flashes of the offense that the Red Sox need going into 2023. Mm-hmm. I don't think Rojas would be able to contribute the way that Red Sox fans look at this lineup and say, we need more offense. I don't think that's the answer. But then, go the other side. There's no denying his defense. And right. You don't know, people are concerned about Trevor Story's arm, and they are worried that maybe his arm won't stay healthy, even though he's played shortstop pretty much his entire career when he was with the Rockies. And I don't know. It's a double-edged sword with him, right? Because you need somebody at shortstop. He's proven that he is incredibly talented on the defensive side while playing that position. do you want to bring him in pretty cheap, $10 million deal, and going to save you a lot of runs? He's going to make the plays that are probably going to be missed with Xander Bogaerts out of this lineup. It's just the offense there where you still need help, even if you bring him in. Red Sox are not really in a desirable position going into 2023, but of course you look at him and he'd probably come cheap, right? He's older on the expiring deal. He's probably not going to require a package the way the other three players we talked about, but I don't know. I like the defense. I just don't think it's what this team desperately needs right now.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was looking up his stuff preparing for this episode, the first thing that came to mind is, well, if he's good at defense and he can't hit, let's just get Jose Iglesias, who can actually hit for contact and is incredible at defense. And when you look at the 230, what was it? I think 236. That's one thing that it doesn't excite me. And the only 6 home runs, and he played majority of the season. He only missed 22 games, and so you're going to have a guy who is on the field a lot, but is he going to really be able to help you win a ball game? Yes, he'll save you some runs, but will he be able to help you get across some runs? No, I don't think so.
Well, it's like Jackie Bradley Jr., right? It's the argument a lot of people constantly made about Jackie Bradley was that his defense was incredible. No one looked at him and said his defense sucked. That was never the issue with him. It was his offense, and that he was hitting sub 200 and being in these positions where the Red Sox could win games, but he's not even making contact with the ball. He's striking out, or if he is making contact, he's grounding into a double play. So do you want somebody, not comparing those two in the terms of different positions, and they bring different things to their teams, but do you want another player who's just excels at defense, but you look at him in the lineup and you're like, oh my God, we're down 2. The bases are loaded and Miguel Rojas is up. Like you don't want to feel that way about a player in your lineup.
No, not at all. And I'm really curious to see sort of what everybody over on Twitter thinks is some guys that they'd be willing to be able to trade. But we're going to talk about that in our next and final segment. But before we do that, Lauren just wants to take a second to talk to you about Built Bar.
I love Built Bar. You all know that by now. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the calories, then you have to try Built Bar. And the holidays are over. We're in our first full week of January. And a lot of goals and resolutions are around eating healthier, maybe going to the gym a little bit more. And one of mine is eating healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste. So again, Built Bar is the bar for you. It's healthy. It tastes really good. It doesn't have that cardboard taste that some other protein bars have. And if you're sitting here thinking, well, what makes Built Bar so good? Let me tell you, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. So they're automatically all very, very delicious. And there are several different flavors that Built Bar comes in. There's churro, there's cookie dough, there's coconut, almond. There's something for everyone, even if you're not a big peanut butter person, but you love coconut. There's something for everyone, no matter your taste buds, no matter what your favorite flavor is. Built Bar has it. Head to your nearest Walmart. You can walk to their pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, my favorite, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run in and grab the 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Just make sure you head on over to your Walmart, your Sam's Club, and pick up a box of Built Bars.
You heard it here. Go over and check out Built Bar. They are really delicious. They're a really good snack. If you're running around like we are, or if you're just looking to get back in shape for the new year of 2023. But starting to look at some players that fans on Twitter feel comfortable trading for one of these 4 guys. Starting off with Sammy James, he said Rafaela, York, Romero, Mata, Houck, Verdugo, Wong, Dalbec. Take your pick. Then we got
nice list.
Dan Bolano. Nice. Yeah, he was all ready. We got Dan
yeah,
Bolano.
he was ready.
Anyone that isn't Meyer in the lower levels, and Houck, Dalbec, and Duran from the bigs. That's it. That's the list. Yeah, I don't 100% know if how much Dalbec and Duran really command anymore. But I feel like if you're able to give him one of the top guys in the road in the farm system, and then Houck maybe 2, you could probably get a Cabrera or a Lopez or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about Jarren Duran, and I do think that he'll eventually be traded. And now it just kind of becomes like, where does Bobby Delbeck belong on this team? It's an important spring training for the both of them, but if you can package them properly, whether that's together or with another prospect, I think you have to take advantage of that because they've both shown that they can be Major League Baseball players. And maybe it's just a change of scenery that they both need. I think Duran needs that more than Delbeck, but I think that they're perfect candidates to be traded because the package and the potential that they could get, you're not going to do a 1-for-1 swap. I doubt it with either of those players, but there's something there for the both of them.
And then we got Extend Q that said any prospect not named Meyer, Blyce, or Casas. We completely agree with you. So the main people that I'm seeing is Houck, York, Lugo, and then a lot of people are obviously saying Duran, Dalbec, and then Mata's another one that people have brought up as well. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I also said the Red Sox got to figure out sort of which parts of the pitching depth do they really see a future with. And obviously it's great to have as much pitching depth as possible in AAA to, whether it's a COVID situation, whether it's an injury situation, whatever it is. We saw how valuable pitching depth was last season. But, I think that's the main thing that they really got to figure out in understanding who really are whatever the untouchables, or who are they really comfortable, trading and sending to another team.
Yeah, I mean that's a good list too because you have you have your untouchables, but then you have another slew of players that you can choose from. And if there's players that fans are looking at and being like, do not trade them, there's obviously they see something in them, whether that's they can contribute to the future of this team or they can contribute by bringing in a different sort of trade package down the line. But
Right.
I think that so far all of our answers are very good. Like they're not.
Yeah,
They're
we got Chris H who said don't give up Casas and Bayo, and also Meyer. Obviously that's a very similar thing that I've heard. We got Benny
yep.
Bicep said rotation of Houck, Whitlock, Bayo, Mata, and Cabrera would be unstoppable. Couldn't agree more. We got CJP. He said York, Rafaela, Duran, and a lower A guy fit for Cabrera and Wendell. I did also see something on Fangraphs, or no, not Fangraphs. I'm sorry, Fansided, and it was an interesting trade that I thought was interesting. And obviously since it was from Fansided, a fan made up trade, not something that is from an ESPN or Bleacher Report, but still I thought it was curious. It was Triston Casas, Zach Kelly, two of our friends, and Triston Casas for Pablo Lopez and Joey Wendell.
Yeah, that's a trade, all right. And you said we weren't going to talk about Joey Wendell in this episode, but you look at something like that where on paper, yeah, it looks fine, right? But then do the Red Sox really want to give up all of that potential? Here we go again. But and to players who can be crucial to your team's success in the future, I think 2024 you can look at and be like, this team can be very competitive, and they still have a chance to be competitive in 2023. I just think that when you have who you have in your farm system and looking ahead to 2024 and beyond, you don't want to get rid of some of those names like the Casases, the Bayos, maybe the Matas. I think I'd be the most comfortable giving up Mata, but with someone like Bayo and Casas, when you want them part of your lineup, then let's just keep them here.
Right, and Mata's a guy who I'm so excited to see it in Worcester. Tyler Murray brought it up as a guy to watch. I believe TQ said the same exact thing. Cooper Boardman said Mata as well, same with Emmanuel Valdez. And so, when three representatives from the Woo Sox who work for the team and are with and around the team majority of the time when they're home, you really got to take those guys seriously and their words seriously. And so I'm really curious to see sort of how Mata is able to continue to develop. But, while we continue to go towards the opening day and the rumor mill keeps on swirling for the Red Sox, we're going to continue to bring up different possibilities and evaluating some trades that could potentially happen throughout the rest of this offseason, while also bringing you great Red Sox content 3 times a week throughout this offseason. But before we end this episode, just wanted to take a second. We haven't really talked about this at all on the podcast, but even though this is a baseball podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit about just sort of what the Damar Hamlin situation sort of brought into my mind. This is one thing that we've talked about a few times on this podcast, but just the idea of not knowing when something catastrophic or an event could happen to anybody that you love or that you care about. And obviously the Hamlin situation reminded everybody of that, and reminded everybody of how valuable life is, how valuable different things that we have in our life, and just waking up on a given day, how grateful we need to be just to even have that happen. I think, the reminder of, telling your friends and family that you love them, even if it's just like a small text here or there, or just checking in on people, just really being aware in caring about everybody around you who, makes an impact on your life, I think is super important.
Yeah, 100%. And it shouldn't take a situation like Damar Hamlin's to let us know that we should be telling those around us how much they mean to us. And unfortunately, sometimes it does, but it sounds like he's going to be okay. He was tweeting during the Patriots Bills game. He looks like he's in great spirits, obviously surrounded by really, really good people and a huge, huge support system. And the biggest thing I saw, it was constant, he's only 24, he's only 24. And you just never know what life has in store for you. You don't know your own path. You don't know what life has for you tomorrow, in the next 10 minutes, in the next hour. And it's just really important to cherish it. And it's also very important to know CPR. A lot of places, they offer classes to get certified. I get certified every year or every 2 years, and it's just so crucial to understand the basics of CPR, because it's not like you see in the movies or any of your TV shows that we love to watch. It can be very, very traumatic, and 9 times out of 10 it is traumatic, because you're watching someone you love get resuscitated by some stranger's hands. And it's so important to know what you're doing when you're giving CPR. So take those classes, tell all of your loved ones that you love them. It's cliche, but we just truly never know when our time is up here, or when something catastrophic and life-changing can happen to us. And this happened in prime time in front of millions of viewers, one of the NFL's biggest games of the year. And it just goes to show that it's not just about football. It's not just about a game. It's life. It's somebody's human life on the line. And just tell your favorite people that you love them every day.
And I think it was really cool over this last week to see not only this NFL community, not only the sports community, but just I feel like the human community, they
Yeah, yeah,
come together. Like even my mom brought it up, like my grandma asked me, you know what I mean? Like people who normally don't talk about football related things or just sports related things all the time with me. It was cool to see them bring it up and,
yeah.
um, use it as a reminder to look at the deeper parts and the more simplistic parts of life and what we should really be grateful for. But, we're really grateful each and every single day that people want to listen to this podcast. People take their time and seconds out of their day to listen to us talk about our favorite team. And we greatly appreciate you making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make sure to check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is this prospect encyclopedia, and he goes deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. I referred something about speaking about him in this episode. He does a great job of looking at tons of different trade packages, looks at everything regarding the MLB farm systems. And so if you want to learn more about prospects, definitely go and check out Lindsey. We've also had him on this podcast a few times. Very intelligent, does a really good job of doing his research before each and every single episode. So make sure to go over and check out Locked On MLB Prospects. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. You can also follow myself. It's at Jake Iggy. And also Lauren. It's La, 3 laws. Lauren with 4 R's. But one thing we always try to do with each and every single episode is get you involved. And so whether, you only follow one of us or, if you follow Locked On Red Sox, whatever it is, follow one of us, because for the most part we're going to be tweeting out different sort of stuff regarding the episode that we're going to be recording that given night or a few days ahead of time. And so that's one thing that we love to do is ask a question before each episode, so then you're able to be involved in what we're talking about. But as always, greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll talk to you and see you guys next time, but we'll end it how we always end it. Let's go Sox. Peace.